Hello.
Hello, hello. How's it going?
Quite well. Cannot complain.
Good. Although I don't know if those are mutually exclusive.
What?
It can be going quite well, and you can still have complaints.
It's perfect. Everything is running smooth. It's fine. The
Great.
tomato seeds are planted, so it's a good day.
I'm assuming indoors, or is it just a lot nicer in Austria than it is here?
No, you normally start planting your tomato seeds indoor.
Yeah, that makes
Now
sense.
for 3 weeks or so till they have a certain size, and in April or May they will get outdoor. So
Got ya. Nice. Hey, Thomas.
hello.
Hello, hello. You'll be at KubeCon, right, Thomas?
Yes.
Cool. All right. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Will be great. When are you coming to Amsterdam?
I'll be there all week, so I'm taking the red eye from on Sunday night, so I'll be there like Monday morning ish, and then there all week. So yeah, probably lots of opportunities to get together, and then I'll remind the community at the meeting today, but we do have a Slack channel for KubeCon, so if you haven't already, feel free to join that. We'll try to communicate like where we'll be at and the booth and all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah, I'm already on it.
Perfect. Give people time to join real quick. I think we have a decent agenda already. Let me share what we have already. And if you don't mind just adding in your name as a participant, give it a minute or two. I know Todd is at least joining, and he's got a few of the first topics, so we'll have to at least wait for him. Hey, Todd, welcome.
Hey, guys.
All right, I just sent it. I'll send it again. If you want to join the meeting notes real quick, just try to add yourself as a participant, and I'll follow those rules and add myself right now. All righty. Well, I guess we can skip the introducing newcomers. I recognize everyone on the call. Well, actually, Simon, I guess this is probably your first time. So yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, I'm not sure what I should tell. Hi, my name is Simon. I'm the software engineer at Dynatrace, and I'm helping a lot of our communities when it comes to tooling, etc. And that's the main reason I'm here. So maybe you have seen me in the Slack channel already, pointing out some pull requests and suggestions, and I'm looking forward working with you guys. Oh.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Simon. Good to have you here. And yeah, he like you mentioned, Simon's got a quick topic, pretty cool stuff he's working on. So yeah, definitely looking forward to that part of the conversation today. And then Andrew, I'm not sure. Yeah. Hello. I think
Hey guys,
you're
how's it
new.
going?
Hey, good.
I
How you
am.
doing?
I'm not doing too bad. Yeah, sorry. So yeah, I'm new hire over at Taplytics and DevCycle. So Nick sent me the invite and said you got to check these guys out. It's going to be great. So yeah, pumped to be here and check out what's going on.
All right, perfect. Well, welcome. Good to have you. I'm gonna send it again in the Slack chat, but those are our meeting notes, and feel free to add anything to the agenda. And then if you're willing, add yourself to the participant list, just so we have the history there. And I guess we can go ahead and get started. It looks like first up we have Todd.
Yeah, so I think I'll be fairly short and sweet, but like I talked about last meeting, we've obviously had stuff in the works for the client side for a long time. We did recently merge 2 of the 3 OpenFeature enhancement proposals that I characterized as like critical for the web and client support in general. And also we have a draft PR that's been getting a resurgence of attention lately. So with all that, in mind, I figured it was probably about time to actually release an artifact that kind of would exemplify some of this stuff. So we did publish the web SDK. It's being published right now from the JS SDK. So look in the JS SDK, it's now basically like a mono repo. And I realized, Mike, I'm supposed to be the scribe for this meeting, but while I'm talking, if you wouldn't mind filling in for me, I hope that's not too much of a problem. Thanks. Yeah, so feel free to go check out the web SDK. I think there's only been 2 versions of it published. It is experimental. The version number is like 010-experimental. So it's pretty obvious to anybody who downloads it that it's experimental. But feel free to build on that if you'd like to try it out. And it should help us validate some of the things we believe we need in the official web SDK. So yeah, there's no tests in the repo yet for it, unlike all of our published stuff. But I do have issues for integration tests and unit tests. I didn't think it was worth putting too much time into testing with something that was so experimental. But sooner than later, as we stabilize, obviously those will come. So and kind of related to that, the playground, I have a big branch in the playground that I is all pushed up, that I did not link here, but I will in the notes, that basically implements some like demo quality vendor providers. So basically I have 3 of the 5 that currently existed in the playground demo there. And again, they're demo quality, they're not released or published or anything. It's just showing how you might build, how vendors might build providers with the web SDK. I'll link that branch in this meeting, so you guys can take a look at that. Also might be educational. So those are the 2 main things I wanted to talk about in terms of the web SDK. And then I also have two links. We recently did merge changes to the governance charter on the technical committee. So now that we've been kind of operating in a startup mode, as I like to say, for the first bit of the project, but now that we're kind of our bootstrap teams are reaching the end of their terms, I figured it was important to kind of have this outlined. Actually, let me pause there. Did anybody have any questions about the web SDK or any of the stuff I just talked about? Cool.
Just to emphasize though, like I guess the call to action there is test it out. So try to build, like, if you're representing a vendor or a tool, try to build, try to add support using that experimental SDK. Like now is a great time to get feedback, make spec changes, whatever. Once that's basically approved and in, it becomes much more challenging. So yeah, please take a look.
Yeah, and related to that, the other thing I'll do, like I said, I have this branch with the demo providers I was talking about. Like I said, 3 of the 5 that are in the playground. So right now I think I've done Launch Darkly, Split, and 1 more, I can't remember which, but I'm going to do all 5 that are in the playground, and I'll open a PR and kind of highlight those. And so if you're a vendor if you're one of those vendors, you can go look at your implementation, the implementation I've done, and see if it kind of makes sense, or what I might have done wrong. But anyway, yeah, I hope that elucidates some feedback. So I'll do that after this meeting. Yeah, and then back to the technical committee stuff. So we did recently merge changes defining the responsibilities of the technical committee, and there is an open PR already linked in the notes for the election process. There's still a few questions there, so we may want to have that ironed out. I'd definitely like to have it done by the end of this month, because the term ends for the first TC next month. I think it's April 18th. So we definitely want to have it done before then. Any questions on that one?
Yeah, I think it's April 28th. So
28th, 10 days off.
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's all right. It's all right. It's an easy to remember date for me. Yeah, I think only one question that was still open there, which I saw you put in about an hour ago. In the draft, I put in 25%, but yeah, you're right. There are only 3 people, so it would be impossible. Yeah, I think we can change that to 33. I think one thing that's open for discussion is if with this coming election, we want to just add people and to what number we want to get, or if we want to stick with 3 people in the TC. Let's say Otel doesn't, from what I've seen, doesn't really have, for example, an expiration on the term when it comes to the TC. So we could follow in those lines, honestly. And then simply when someone is no longer able to, let's say, fulfill the duties, or decides they want to step down, then we can open up the conversation to lowering the number or having like an ad hoc election to then replace the person that leaves.
Yeah, so usually the TC is not limited by the amount of people. I mean, for the governance board, it makes sense because it shouldn't grow too big, and you want to have an uneven number to get decisions while still allowing enough interested parties to be represented there. The TC is usually seen as supporting the GC on technical questions, and is also related to project size and project momentum. So while it might be overdoing it, but you could even argue that like there should be a TC member for every major language that we are supporting in there, if this is what we wanted. I'm not saying it needs to be there, like some people might be maintainers of more languages, or I think we should just have a good mix in there to not forget people who actually implement providers. So it's I think more defining like what do we want the mixture to look like. I mean, you can have all the SDK people in there, but as for example, seeing Thomas here as somebody writing a provider, you have different interests or a different opinion on certain topics that you would have as somebody writing the SDK. So I think that's something we should guarantee there, but I wouldn't limit it to the amount of people. You also want to have continuity in there, so you usually don't want to vote out people. It's just very often for people to step like in their open source career that they're moving up like to becoming a TC member, and like with everything that's like a career or an advancement step, that the process should be clear there, and I think that's the key part. I haven't read it yet. I'll have a look at it.
Yeah.
I also think in some cases it's just an appointment, like somebody needs to be proposed by at least 2 other TC members and maintainers, and then it's just accepted by the GC that they join, and there's no like official voting almost. So, but I didn't have a look at it yet, Todd.
Okay, well, I think a lot of the things you said are really actually great points. So maybe David or even you, if you want to look at the PR, could add them, because what you just said, you had some concise input that I think makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I personally agree with what you're saying. I don't think we need to limit it. I think practically, I think one of the current members does want to step down, so we probably do need some more people. But yeah, I don't see a reason to limit it. And I think maybe one of the things we can even add to the responsibilities of the TC chair is in the meetings that, and this is proposed in the recent changes that were adopted to the charter, but that the chair would, maybe in addition to those, the chair probably should evaluate involvement of current TC members and, follow up with them or remove them from the TC if they're not participating anymore. But I guess we don't need to limit it.
Yeah, like right now, it's basically it's kind of done by other TC members, so it's not a larger election or something too complex. One thing I just saw, I thought I had actually removed was some other projects have that when someone leaves, if there then is a majority of a company, that automatically one of those people has to be removed. I would rather put in, we hold an election to replace the person that left. Or we try to, because otherwise, let's say there are 3 people right now, if one leaves and then the proportions don't fit anymore, it's a bit weird. Like, oh, you have to leave, and then it doesn't work anymore because then the other person has to leave as well. In our case, but
yeah, but I think that's a very theoretical case. Because you have representatives like from different orgs. That would mean that there was already a majority, like more than one from one org there before, which can happen early stage, and then it would be like fully governed by like one institution. I would rather say if we remove somebody from the TC, to say, okay, it should be replaced by somebody with a similar skill set, which you would naturally do. Either being a maintainer of the same project,
Mhm.
And also like having like the same role, like being somebody who's working on a provider, somebody from the maintainer side,
Yeah.
vendors and so
But I
forth.
think going back to your point that the TC is more of a like a supporting body, not like a voting body, we probably don't need to have an election to immediately resolve that. We can just say, okay, we've lost a person, now we need to seek to find somebody else, you know, at a reasonable time frame.
And usually the decision, like in many others, like speaking also for the GC here, can be done by the GC members together with the TC. If it's already proposed in a majority by the TC, then it's just for the GC to board and say, okay, and why wouldn't they? But it could obviously also be the other way around, that the GC says, hey, just coming up with something like Ruby is getting super successful. Nobody's representing Ruby in the TC. We think it would be a good idea to have a Ruby representative in the TC. And then whoever is acting as the chair. I like the idea of having a TC chair, like not in a role that he's the boss of the TC, but he's like more or less the one taking care of the organizational points of view and like acting as the single point of contact for the GC. Because who do you otherwise usually reach out to? And this might even be a role that you're switching like from like quarter to quarter or on a quarterly basis from one to the other, who's like acting TC chair. Just that because it's mostly organizational burden, that or organizational responsibilities and no real decision.
Okay.
All
right. So I think I don't want to hog any more of the time today, but yeah, I'll follow up and also add some of these, maybe propose some of these changes in the PR as well.
All right,
That
perfect.
works.
Yeah, thanks. I think it actually ties in pretty nicely to what Simon's going to be talking about in a second. So yeah, good stuff. So yeah, I guess over to Simon, unless there's any questions. And just a reminder, I did link the meeting notes again too. If you're just joining, you can feel free to click on that and follow along. So over to you, Simon.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everybody. So I will shortly talk about the centralized approach I'm just suggesting for, I'm sharing my screen. I hope everybody can see it, about managing the community and managing the users on GitHub, because we see from time to time, it's getting really hard to manage those, manage the alignment to teams, etc., and keep that in overview. And therefore, I opened a proposal for the community management with Perivolos. Perivolos, for those who don't know Perivolos, is a tool developed and maintained by Kubernetes. And Kubernetes uses it for themselves to manage their whole organization as assignments, etc. So this is a tool which is actively used to handle such kind of loads and do this kind of work, actually. And the proposal is that we do not follow 100% the approach which Kubernetes is using, because they are configuring the permissions on a repository level. And especially in the OpenFeature world, you most of the time have two repositories. Like for the SDKs, you have the Java, you have one SDK and one contrib repository more likely. And for that, I suggest a little bit of a different approach. For that, I also have opened already a short POC where you will see somewhat the structure, how it is working and how it will be applied. It will be run with GitHub Actions. If I'm going too far into detail, just stop me. And the configuration is like following: that you have a config folder, and the first folder is more likely the organization you are managing. So you can put in there even a sandbox organization or other organizations if there are some to come. You have one organization file which describes the organization itself, who are admins, who are members of those organizations. You have the possibility to define teams in here, so overall teams which are not in those working group teams, let's say that way, which are not assigned to repository. I come to that later. And the cool part is you can also define your repository with a certain aspect, so you can easier provision and maintain those repository. And then it comes to, then we have those teams or work groups, like for example the .NET SDK, where we define which repositories are within this work group and who are maintainers, who are approvers, who are admins. And for example, the same thing comes also for the organization. We put that also in a work group where we have the OFAB, the community, the .github, and the spec within one. And with that, we can easily add new members with a good history behind that. And we can easily manage also the repositories and can assign them and generate groups, etc. Yeah. I would highly like, so if you have some kind of feedback for that, I would highly recommend, please write something to the issue. The more feedback we have, the better it is. And we will soon more likely take a look close at what I implemented in the POC, where I maybe have some misconceptions or misread the markdown files or misunderstood something, and figure that out and bring that into a shape, if that's okay for everyone.
This seems really interesting to me. I guess one specific question I have is, does this make code owners files in individual repos obsolete, or does it work with them, or how does that work?
No, it's more like it's only generating the GitHub permissions. It does not can generate the code owners files, etc. So code owners still exist, and you should still maintain them. But currently, for example, there is a maintainer group. I took shortly a look at it. There's a maintainer group, and sometimes the maintainer group only has in some repositories write permissions, although it's the global maintainers group, and it's currently quite inconsistent. And with that, we get a little bit of consistency, and also a little bit of reproducibility and transparency into how permissions are assigned and who has access to what.
I think the question would be, could it also manage the code owners? Because I just filed today on one of some projects a PR on exactly this, that code owners were not in line, also the structure changed.
Yeah, I mean, worst case, we could use the code owners to reference that group that was created through here. So I think there's ways to kind of to handle it, but I mean, this, in my opinion, is a great first step. At least we can make it very obvious who has access to what, make it, even in line with what we just talked about too. It's like if the TC changes and we just open a pull request, and it's very transparent about who has access to what and how that kind of all flows. So yeah, and I think we could layer in that complexity too, with like, maybe centralized code owner files or something too at a later point.
Yeah, I mean, I also think it's great having it centralized. I didn't understand it just from the PR, so this is super helpful. I think what will be great that people can modify to have a short docs, like how it should be modified if you want to change something. I mean, it should be straightforward, but honestly, when I just looked at the PR and not knowing variables, I was a bit overwhelmed with everything that you were committing. Now that you explained it in 2 or 3 minutes, I have a much better idea and understanding about it. So I think that everybody comes over to you and say, hey, Simon, I want to change something here. How am I going to do that?
Yeah, I can definitely update the README and add a better explanation to that.
And I think the comment on can this also manage code owners files just shows that there is the need and the pain point in the project to have this done more centrally.
But I think what Mike said with using those teams in the code owner files rather than persons will actually allow it to better handle that, because you can use the teams and define them in the owner rather than individuals, and then you can use that in combination with variables.
Which is the more maintainable way anyways, yes.
Agreed.
Cool. Yeah, well done. Thanks for the quick overview. And if anyone has any questions or feedback, either leave it here, reach out to Simon, put it on Slack. So certainly interested in the feedback here, but I think it's a nice initiative. And it looks like you have the next topic too, Simon.
Yes. So I started to working a little bit on the documentation, and to increase it, maybe the contributors from FlagD saw my pull requests, etc. The first step we did is actually we tried to make the content more visible from different kind of sections of the OpenFeature community. And one part was adding the community repository, because the community files are quite important, how we are structured. And now, this is a different topic browser, sorry. We added them now, the community files, directly out of the repository in the documentation. This allows people to way easier navigate our community files, gives a better overview, and we still have it in one repository to maintain. And this way we have a better overview of those. People can easier read into that, and it's even easier to maintain when you see the structure in a more like web page way rather than on GitHub markdown files and reading just markdown files. We will also continue with that slowly and try to integrate FlagD as a proposal for now. There will be soon a deploy preview where we also will have the FlagD documentation then within the OpenFeature documentation, just as some kind of sneak peek how we could handle other documentations within the documentation side for easier usage and visibility and overview for the users. Yeah. Any questions regarding that?
All right, cool. Thanks, Simon. All right. I have a couple quick ones. So first up, Google Summer of Code. So we have one project proposal out there right now. David and I have signed up as like co-mentors on that, and so far there's been a lot of interest, almost a shocking amount of interest, to be honest, and like almost mini competition between students and stuff that we're trying to manage right now. So I did want to throw it out there. We do technically have until the end of the week to add additional proposals out there. So if anyone wants to be a mentor, there's definitely mentees, I think, that are interested in working on these projects. So just throwing it out there. There's certainly no obligation, but it could be a pretty good opportunity to work with some pretty motivated students. And I did provide a link in the docs here. Sorry, go ahead.
I had a very brief thought on this. I don't know if we agree, but one thing we could have help with, I suppose, is implementing some of the SDKs that aren't finished. So there's the Rust and the Rust and the Ruby SDK. I think Ruby might be close to done, but even Rust, it's obviously a language a lot of people are interested in. If we wanted to offer those up as Summer of Code projects, we just need to make sure we had somebody comfortable with those languages overseeing
that
those
is the
projects.
Challenge. Yeah, 100%. So and that's, I guess, a good point too. If there's something like that people feel comfortable being a mentor, it's just basically a matter of creating the issue somewhere and then creating that proposal. So it's pretty straightforward. The CNCF was approved as like an organization for Google Summer of Code. So like we will have projects here. It's just a matter of like, do the students or the mentees want to work on the project? Because I think they have to apply for it. And so there's a bit of a process there. So yeah, so just throwing it out there. There's certainly no obligation, but if anyone's interested in kind of helping out, I think it's a pretty good opportunity for both the project and for obviously those students as well. And the next one I'm going to defer because I see that Justin's already added a section on this, so I will let him take that one over when we get to it. So for now, I'll hand it over to Sky.
Hi, so I've been working on a proof of concept for extending OpenFeature operator to support the deployment of FlagD in client-side context, so that it's externally accessible. I've added a link to the proof of concept and OFEP in the doc and in the FlagD channel. If anyone's interested, we're hosting a office hours to discuss this further and kind of go over some of the decision points tomorrow. There is a link in the doc and channel to register your available times.
Cool, thanks, Guy. David.
Yes, all right. Since you brought it up at the beginning, just some updates for KubeCon. So we officially do have an OpenFeature kiosk. We actually have the full schedule, let's put it like that. So if anyone is interested in participating, I'll be posting I don't know if it will be an issue or something like that, to kind of gather who would be available to kind of be at the kiosk throughout the conference. We also received a project meeting slot, so we have 1 hour. This will be on April 18th. I'll add in the time. I'm not sure if it's 10:30 or 9:30. Yeah, and then as we mentioned before, there's a Slack channel specifically for KubeCon. So if you want to join in there, if you're planning on participating, yeah, just reach out, and I'll be putting there mostly the information for the kiosk and the project meeting. That's pretty much it.
All right, cool. Thanks, David. Justin.
Yeah, hi. Okay, so I filed an OFEP for evaluating an inline evaluation provider, which is evaluating the rules on the server that is executing the client code, not on a remote server. I had a question about so the general sense was that should not be an open feature. And so I marked the thing as rejected, which is fine. And then I put it in the contrib repo. I have a PR for it, which I think still fits the intent of the rejection, which is this is not for the main spec, but it can live in contrib. And I didn't know if we should say something in that OFEP, like rejected, but you can find it in contrib, or something else. I don't know. So interested in feedback on how to handle that piece.
Yeah, I guess I can go first. I think that it is kind of the right approach. Like this is more like a provider implementation, in my opinion, which would be kind of like, a vendor or a, open source tool or whatever. And I think it's perfectly acceptable to live in the contribs repo as such, basically. And so that would be similar to, any of the other tools out there as well. And it's just yet another way to kind of plug it into OpenFeature and use it, if that serves like, or fulfills your use case essentially. I think it works just fine.
Cool.
So, and linking to it, I think makes sense too. So if you want to open a quick pull request, I think I merged your existing one already. So if you want to just add like an amendment there that just says like, the work has been done here or something, that would be nice.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, I think if an OFEP gets merged with a not approved state, putting like reasoning why and subsequent links makes a lot of sense. In this particular thing, also, I just want to highlight, like, I think it's a totally valid use case and something that OpenFeature can even talk about, and I think even does talk about in some of our blog posts. I just don't think we're in a position to spec it right now in any way, in my opinion. But I still think it's a very valuable thing to see and to have and to even talk about.
Yeah, the intent was not for this to make it to the spec. It was to talk about it as a community about what do we think about this idea. Are other people beyond me just are interested in it, yes or no?
Yeah, I think the short answer is like, this is a common pattern actually. So I think that there's certainly interest. I just don't know if there'd be interest in working on like a common, like kind of like in process, evaluation engine of sorts or something. I think that's probably unlikely. But I guess we can leave it open. I think you did start the discussion. If anyone does have interest, like we can re-explore it. If that turns out to be the case.
The next one is we've talked a little bit about scoped providers. So instead of having a giant single provider, we have multiple that are per client. I wanted to just make space to have that conversation to make sure that if anyone had anything that they wanted to talk about with regards to that, so we can.
Yeah, we may want to do the same thing that we're doing with some of those flag D proposals. Like maybe we carve out just like a dedicated like office hour thing for this, because I really think this is a good idea, and trying to just get people on the same page and push it through maybe like the quickest way to make this happen. It's up to you if you want to do it that way or not, but I think this makes testing easier. It solves some of the other problems that like other people have mentioned. So I really like the idea, but I think there's, we may just need to get people on the same page, just work through the remaining details and then, spec it out. In my opinion, I don't know if other people are like strongly against it, but I personally think it's a good idea. And there certainly could be value there. Maybe give a quick pitch too, because I'm not sure if everyone else has an understanding, and then we can
let me
move on.
go. Right. Okay. So let me make this a reasonable size for everyone else. Right. Can I just view this? Perfect. So the general idea here is today we have an open feature set provider and we just pass it in a provider. In the new world, we have a notion of a default global provider type. And then you can additionally scope this to a specific client name. And so you can see here, we have a client name of My Suite Library, and then the application author can say, hey, when My Suite Library tries to evaluate stuff, I actually just want to use this stuff on disk. Don't go contact FlagD for that. That's kind of the whole pitch.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense to me, and it's pretty appealing. And if you, I put the issue in this PR that you're showing right now in the notes, but I think that we've already seen some people kind of rub up against the limitations around this. So I think it's a kind of a good thing to think about. I'd love to get especially if you've done. If you contribute to the spec or an SDK, I'd love to get more people's feedback on this. But it seems interesting to me, and like it could solve some real people's problems. Specifically, there's one from a contributor in the Java SDK who works at, I can't remember exactly, but who's running into this issue in their rather large Java code base. So I think it offers us some valuable flexibility.
Yeah, and the testing aspect could be pretty handy too, because we had to do some pretty wild things to get it working in some of our tests with the kind of the global singleton model that we have. So okay, yeah, I think let's continue to push this one forward, Justin, and see if we can get this thing. If we want to do like a quick sync, like in a call or something, we could do that. If we want to just keep pushing it through Slack, that works too. But I think conceptually it makes sense. It's just really kind of figuring out what how it would work, and how it would feel to users without introducing like breaking changes would be the other consideration there. And then it looks like you have one more item. Should be pretty easy to answer.
People at my work are wondering. So I finally got to deliver the KubeCon stickers that I picked up for OpenFeature to our main office. And I just got a Slack message this morning. They're like, hey, everyone wants more stickers. What's going on with that? How do I get more stickers? And so I think eBay would be very fine to pay for said stickers. But if you have contacts on how to get stickers that are OpenFeature branded, that would be great.
Yeah, all right, go ahead,
Sorry.
David.
No, sorry. I was just gonna say, so the CNCF definitely, like, so at KubeCon there will be the stickers because the CNCF supplies them for all the projects. Getting specifically stickers made, I think that's more your question.
My question is, my company is not going to KubeCon EU, to my knowledge, but people in my organization would love stickers. How do they make that happen?
I don't have a good answer for that.
I mean, I can grab a few from KubeCon. We also I have a few that we've made previously that I could send you that would sort of help solve that problem. We also have the Figma files for these. If you want to basically just take them, export it, and then like go to whatever Sticker Mule or something to order some shiny ones or whatever. So that's all totally available. So whatever you'd prefer. I'm happy to ship you some too. I have a couple, 100 at this point.
Yeah, I think that the printing, so I think we will find a sponsor for printing. That's not the big issue. It's rather a distribution topic. Like sending them all around. I mean, bring them to KubeCon or to certain events would be fine. And usually finding somebody who takes the logistics of distributing them widely is a challenge.
Yeah, but I can send a few to Justin. I can trust him to distribute it at eBay, I guess, this time. But yeah, for one-off things, it does become a little tricky. And I think like the short answer is we either need to figure out like some kind of distribution thing that doesn't cost a fortune and is relatively easy to do, or have people show up to like different events, and we'll just have people that bring them and can distribute.
Yeah.
Or identify a couple of core people who are going to speak, and we then send it to them that they can better distribute it, and maybe us pick it up. But just from what we did on other projects, like redistributing stuff becomes a full-time job for somebody.
In your case, Justin, if someone's also at the open source summit, I can smuggle them there. from KubeCon. It's 2 weeks later, so it's not a long wait.
Yeah, just message me. I'll send you some for now. But then I think for a more long-term solution, we can figure out other ways to distribute it. But if you send me your address or something, I'll get some in the mail later this week.
Thank you.
I think we just make this a pyramid game, right? If anybody wants a sticker, say yes, here you get 10. So you have to distribute 9 to other people as well. And when they receive a sticker, say yes, now you're receiving 10, and that's how we eventually have everybody have a sticker. Yeah, I think the production is not the issue. Sending it to a couple of people isn't either. So if you go into an event and if you want to redistribute it, I think we can find a way to make this happen. And just share it in the channel. Hey, I would need some, and then you more or less act as then we send it to somebody and they can act like with some further distribution. As we go
I'm
along.
also willing to make the sacrifice to travel to the West Coast as long as somebody else pays for it and deliver stickers.
That's exactly when we were talking about cost of distribution.
All right, cool. Yeah. I'll try to get that taken care of. But yeah, it would be awesome if we can distribute more stickers. So maybe the pyramid scheme is the way to go too. So just think about that. I did add one more item, and if anyone else has any last items, feel free to quickly add it. But I just wanted to remind people that there's some killer Coda tutorials that Adam has been working on. Some of them were based on Pete's recent blog post, which I think was really well done. And they're actually pretty fun to go through. Like it's kind of a cool way to go from like kind of hard coded feature flag values all the way to more like dynamic feature flags. And it kind of tells a cool story and why, why OpenFeature is valuable, things like that. So definitely take a look, play around with it, provide feedback. And yeah, I think those are pretty well done. So I had a good time going through it. So
Yeah,
encourage you to try them.
Also, like everybody, if you have some social channels, please also, I mean, as we want to increase the reach, just also share them if you can. That's also helpful for other people. I mean, it's just, we can craft the message. Obviously, every one of you can write their own message, but to make them easily shareable, either Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever channel that will tell more people what's out there about LinkedIn. I know that everybody is usually willing to do it, but if we don't bring it up explicitly, people can just forget to do it.
Yep, I did add the link to the meeting notes too, if anyone wants to just directly check that out.
Since we have a little bit more time, I'll try and find the issue. Oh, actually, I think it's one opened by Tom. And particularly anybody here who's representing a vendor. Yeah, give me one sec here. I'm trying to find the issue. So there's maybe actually it's a PR. Yes, okay, yeah, so it's this one here. So basically there was a question about making FlagD pluggable for vendors. And I just put the OFEP in there. This is something that has been kind of a hypothetical for FlagD for a long time, but the whole idea is because the interfaces inside FlagD look very intentionally similar to the Go provider interfaces, you could, with a little bit of massaging, plug basically a Go provider for a vendor, like LaunchDarkly, Flagsmith, whatever, into FlagD if you wanted to, hypothetically. So this is something that we've heard come up a number of times. Tom has opened this PR talking about it. I'd love to know if there's any vendors that are particularly interested in helping POC this, or if there's any interest here. And you can feel free to follow up on that PR, and I think there's an associated issue. But yeah, it's something that is hypothetically possible. I'd like to see if anybody's interested in doing it or helping with it.
Yeah, we might be interested in doing this. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
We're a super small team, but one of us, Gurkhan, he can write Go. So Yeah, we could definitely have a look into it. Is it just the kind of standing up and shutting down that's different, and the rest of it's the same? Is that broadly?
Well, I think there's a lot of questions. You know, you know, because they're basically, you know, would we want to do some caching? I think the answer to that is yes. How might the CRDs have to look in Kubernetes to support this if it was going to be, you know, Kubernetes supported, which I think would kind of be taken for granted if it's supported in flag D. The other question is like, how might we build the artifacts? Because we wouldn't want to, I don't think, like include Flagsmith, for example, by default in the flag D binary everywhere. So we want to somehow make it pluggable, or build multiple binaries for any vendor who wanted to support this mechanism. So there's a whole bunch of open questions, and I just kind of like to get the creative juices flowing. So yeah,
Yeah, and
if
that's
you're
probably
interested,
it probably as
Yeah.
in depth as we should go today, but yeah, definitely take a look at that. You know, we can work through
Exactly.
the issue, and if there's any particular question or we want to come up with a prototype or whatever, it's just really kind of gauging interest to see if it's worth the effort or if there's just zero interest or reason to do it. There are some advantages, there's some potential disadvantages to this approach. So yeah, I guess the jury's still out if this is a good idea or not.
Yeah, I hadn't seen this. My only thought was like there's a potential danger of it becoming a kind of if the popularity of the Flag D project continues, and you know, there's a potential that it starts to like confuse what, you know, like, are you building for one interface, you know, what are you building for, what are you targeting, kind of thing. That would be my only you know, my only concern, really.
I think we have this.
You run the risk of like bifurcating the projects or the community and the effort between like basically the kind of non-Kubernetes folk and the Kubernetes folk potentially, right? Why, you know, you just go, oh, well, you know, we're Kubernetes folk, we want to follow that pattern all the way through, and we're going to build for that, and we don't really care about the rest of it.
I mean, it would still work for both. I think I always like the idea because it would be easier to switch over from one flag management system to another. Right now, I would have to more or less rebuild all the application services because I have to put in there. This way, I would only have to change the provider in the flag intermediary. I'm deliberately not calling it flag D right now, but the thing is running the process and it has a provider built in there. So it's actually very similar to what an exporter would do in OpenTelemetry. Honestly, so an OpenTelemetry exporter would do pretty much the same. Which I think would make it very easy to switch things around, at least theoretically. Why am I saying theoretically? Because you would still actually need to exchange this component, and what OpenTelemetry did there is they obviously built like the core OpenTelemetry collector, and then you have the collector builder, and you can then decide which receivers you want to have in there. And then you would eventually see vendors like even providing their own distributions for this intermediary component. So I think it could really help on an upgrade path if I want to move to a commercial solution. But I agree, we should be very explicit that you don't need it for using like the same way. I think you don't need it today for OpenTelemetry, obviously, to run an OpenTelemetry collector, but still, Ben, to your point, it has become like the default practice. What I would still say, if it becomes a default practice for everybody, there's usually a reason for it becoming the default practice as well. I think I would go for the experiment. I think it would be great if we could do that. And yeah, I think that then really talk about positioning if it really works. Because if it's like really super smooth, we could even have like one contains all of like the then package with all the Go providers in there, and you could really switch from any provider to the other. I know Todd will come back to me to know how much memory overhead is and how big the binary is going to be. But I think it would showcase what we want to do even easier in a lot of situations, especially also for third-party software that you might want to configure. So, but I think we anyways need to be more clear on how FlagD is related to this one.
Can we also get a list written up in this OFEP of like the expected pros and cons? So as we're going through it, kind of we can compare against that and see how it ends up.
I think that would be a really valuable thing. I'm going to note that down. Yeah, because I'd like. I first of all, I agree with everything that's been said so far. It's highly experimental. I think we have a lot of open questions here. But yeah, I think before we even really do any POCs, it would just be good to talk around this kind of stuff. Yeah, and pros and cons are probably a great thing to start with. So that's a great point, Dan.
Were you thinking of it, Todd, as like a shim, or that can then sort of sit between the FlagD process and the OpenFeature like provider, or were you thinking of it in some other way?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of ways to do it, so I almost don't want to like get into it too much. But I mean, the off the top of my head, the way we could do this would just be kind of like Alois is saying, build a FlagD or several FlagD images, where basically what's happening right now in FlagD is offloaded to a provider. So
Right.
FlagD itself would just run, and it would be a separate binary, a very similar binary to what we're shipping now, but with some additional components in it that would then be contacting for command and control, contacting a vendor backend of one or another, essentially. Is what I had in mind. But there's certainly other ways to do it for sure. We have gRPC and FlagD, so you could kind of use that as the integration point. There's tons of ways to do this, but yeah.
I definitely do like the pattern that you mentioned, Alois, of not having to, like, you could build a Docker image and then have that being run with different providers without having to change anything within that image at all. Even configuration, which I think is definitely of interest. Yeah,
it would just maybe change like a configuration file and say, okay, now using this same way you configured in the hotel collector, it would just register a different exporter. I think that all of this, I think, actually would work probably pretty straightforward, maybe with some difficulties. The biggest challenge I see is how would we then handle the situation? You start with FlagD, you have a CRD with a configuration, and then you move into a flag management provider. Like how you want to handle this thing, or you don't care.
I also have some questions around if we end up with like flag change listeners, some impact there. So yeah, definitely still have some questions around what it looks like.
Yeah, it's probably a good time to kind of just transition and say, like, take a look at that OFAP. We'll work through some of those like maybe FAQ type things, pros and cons lists, and kind of work asynchronously on that. And we can do a deep dive in a bit. The last thing I'll say on that is like one interesting point for this, like if we can have this like centralized point, when we start looking at integrations in like the OpenTelemetry demo application, for example, this could be a really nice way potentially to just switch between backend vendors to manage these flags and stuff too. So similar to actually how the OpenTelemetry demo app works for observability tools, where you can swap between the tools to give a similar demo. That could be an interesting integration point for us as well here. So yeah, I think we're okay on that one. Is there any other items we want to discuss?
Not to discuss, but we didn't put it on the agenda, but just to bring it up here, we did not forget about the incubation proposal for OpenFeature. It just did not yet get picked up by the TUC. Like we would be good enough to like get started on the due diligence document. So not that this is forgotten, it just did not move forward so far.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? All right, perfect. I guess we'll wrap it up here then. Thanks, everyone. Have a nice day.
Everyone, bye bye.
Bye.